Okay, so we are going to start reading chapter 16, and it is Freak the Mighty. And I just wanted to recap a little bit about chapter 15. That chapter 15 was what came down the chimney, and they were talking about what they got for Christmas. Because I know it's been a little bit of time since we went over Freak the Mighty book. So, chapter 16 is a chip off the old block. Once on the TV, this dude hypnotized a lobster. Maybe you saw it. He touched a lobster and it freezes. It can't move. That's sort of what happens to me when his hand claps over my mouth, like I'm paralyzed and my head is empty, and all there is in this world is this big hand and the cool breath like the wind. So this is where the geezer's stuck up, huh? He whispers. Down in the basement, out of sight, out of mind. I can't see his face. He's this huge shape in this room. Everything changes now, he says. It's time I get to know my own son. Who had his mind poisoned against me? He makes me sit up and shushes me to make sure I won't make any noise. Making noise is the last thing I want to do because I don't know whether or not Grim ever bought that gun he mentioned or what happened to him if he tries to use it. Graham's bad dream about Grim getting shot with his own gun seems pretty real right now, and I don't want to be the one to make it come true. I know what they told me, he says. It's all a big lie. You understand? I never killed anybody, and that's the truth. So help me God. By now, I'm sitting up on the bed, and he's making me point on my clothes. And the weird thing is, none of this is a surprise. Somehow, I always knew this would happen, that he would come for me in the night, that I would wake up to find him there, filling the room, and that I feel empty. I'm so weak. I can hardly put my shoes on. Like when you wake up and your arm is still asleep and you can't hardly make it move. That's what I feel like all over. Numb and prickly and as light as a balloon. Like my hand might float up in the air if I let them. This'll be an adventure, he says. You're going to have the time of your life, boy. Okay, we're leaving, and not a peep out of you. The bulkhead door is open and you can see the stars. Some people think the stars look enough to touch, but Freak says the sky is like a photograph from a billion years ago. It's like just like some old movie just showing up there, and lots of those stars have switched off by now. They're already dead, and what we're seeing is the rerun. Which makes sense if you think about it. Someday the rerun will come to an end and you'll see all the stars start to flick off like a billion little flames blown out of the wind. This way, he says, quiet as a mouse. There's snow on the ground. Not a lot, enough to cover the ground. Not a lot, enough to cover the ground. I can tell how cold the air is, but I can't feel it. Even without a jacket, which I don't have time to put on, the cold doesn't matter. Nothing does, really. Not Grim and Graham, or the old stars in the sky, or Freak and the fair Gwen. They're all just make believe. This dream I was having for a long time, and now I'm awake again. And he's still filling the room somehow, even though we're outside. The lights are out at Freak's house, and I'm thinking, the stars clicked off, and I don't even know why I'm thinking that. It's like a dead voice in my head or something. We're under a street light when he says, let me look at you. He's got these big eyebrows that make it hard to see his eyes, and that's fine. I don't want to see them. Looking at those eyes is asking to have a bad dream. My, he says, checking me out. Will you look at this? It's like I'm looking at an old picture of myself. You really are a chip off the old block. You know that. Pay attention to that saying because I'm going to talk to you about that later. I don't say anything, and he reaches out and touches my face real gentle, as if he never hurt a fly. I say, boy, do you know that? Answer me now. Yes, sir, I say. Everybody says so. Christmas Eve, he says. You know how many Christmas Eves I've been deprived of my own bloodkin? Now, is that fair? To do that to a man, lock him up for a crime he never did? He's waiting for me to answer, and I say, no, sir, not fair. That's over and done now, he says. We're starting fresh. Just you and me, boy. That's how it's meant to be. I'm standing there under the streetlight, and it's amazing how quiet it is. Like everybody went away or died. The quiet is almost as big as he is. He's as tall as me, only wider everywhere. And for some reason, maybe because we're not far from Freak's house, I'm thinking this weird thought. He doesn't need a suit of armor. No, he doesn't need a horse or a lance or a pledge to the king or the love of a fair lady. He doesn't need anything except what he is. He's everything all rolled into one, and no one could ever beat him, not even the brave Lancelot. He's squinting around. His eyebrows are furrowed shadows, and he says, You know what? I think of when I see a neighborhood like this. Hamsters is what I think. That's how these people live, like hamsters in cages. They have their little wheels to run on, and that's what they do for for the whole of their lives. They run and get nowhere. They just spin. I stand there. They poisoned you against me. I know that, he says. Give it time. You'll see the truth. He starts walking fast, and I walk with him. Like my feet already know where to go. We're cutting through the side streets and heading down the pond, all cold and white and frozen. Tomorrow morning, a bunch of kids will take their new sleds and skates out there and probably lose their new mittens and scarves and get yelled at by their moms and dads. But tonight, the pond is as empty as the moon and as empty as my head. Once a car goes by real slow around the pond, and I've got this strange feeling that there's no one at the wheel. He hooks his finger in my shirt collar and makes me duck down under the car goes by. The car passes and you can't see through the dark windows, and you can hear the snow crunching under the tires, squeaky and frozen. We're invincible, he says, making me stand up. Now, isn't that a kick in the pants? My feet already know where we're going. The New Testaments. There are a few lights on in the old buildings, and you can see some of the windows are cracked. It looks like a knife cut against the light, and he's saying, You know about Mary and Joseph, and they sought shelter in Bethlehem, and how the baby Jesus was born in a manger. I try to nod, and the funny thing is, even though I'm not cold, my teeth are chattering. So it's like the rest of me is freezing, but my head hasn't noticed. That's what we're doing, seeking shelter, he says, except this isn't exactly a manger we're going to. No, sir, I say, it certainly isn't. He touches me real soft on the back of the neck and says, I didn't ask you a question, boy. Rule number 1, don't sass your old man. I make sure my mouth stays shut. We're coming up to the Old Testament, and they almost pretty with the new snow coating the roofs and making the yards clean and white and soft. You can see where an old bike handlebar is coming up through the snow, and shapes of the other things left out, and even the old car up on the blocks look new, like it might take off into the air without any wheels. I know where we're going, even though he doesn't tell me. The door opens before we get there, and Loretta Lee is standing in the light, and she's saying, Iggy! Come look what the cat dragged in, he says. Say hello to my boy, Loretta. Ain't he a chip off the old block? So again, they're saying that saying. Then we're inside, and Iggy is there bolting the door behind us and closing the shades. And Loretta, she's wearing this real slinky red dress that looks like it might fall off if she sneezed. She's saying, mission accomplished. Hey, Kenny, I knew you could do it if anybody could. Iggy says, watch your mouth, Loretta. I do believe she's been drinking. My father says, has she been drinking, Iggy? I thought I made myself clear. Hey, it's Christmas Eve, Iggy says, and he sounds real nervous. A little punch, what can hurt? A little punch, Loretta says, and her voice is slurpy, that's all. She's wearing these fake eyelashes, and they're coming loose, so her eyes look almost as blurry as the red mouth. I know because she keeps flapping her eyes at me and smiling so I can see where the lipstick got on her teeth. Iggy says she's okay. Kenny, you got my word? All right, Loretta says. Turned over a new leaf. Preacher Kane turned over a new leaf, so there's no booze for anybody on Christmas Eve, even in our own house where a man is his own castle. Oh, shut up, Iggy says, and he makes Loretta sit down on the busted couch where she kind of leans over and waves at me, wink, wink. Bring me and my boy some food, my father says. We've been out in the cold for 8 long years, and we're hungry, aren't we, son? Yes, sir, I say. Iggy goes out into the kitchen to fry up some hamburgers, and we sit there waiting, not saying anything. Loretta is snuggled up on the couch, passed out with a dreamy look on her face. I eat that greasy hamburger even though I can hardly stand to swallow, and Iggy is fussing around like it's such a big deal having Kenny Kane in the house. And it's hard to believe he's the same Iggy who is the boss in the Panheads, this motorcycle gang that strikes fear into the hearts of everybody, including the cops. Then Loretta wakes up and stretches like a cat, yawning so you can practically see right down her throat, and says, I guess I needed that. Then she giggles, hiding her mouth. I guess I need a lot of things. My father wipes his mouth with his folded up napkin, and he ignores her and looks at Iggy and says, You ever do time? You could be a cook. Iggy gives this nervous hee, like, wouldn't that be fun being a cook in prison? He says, Anytime you want, I'll show you that place I told you about. My father stands up. Now is good, he says. He looks right at me. Come on, boy. That is the end of chapter 16. I want you to think about a question. The question is, how does the character influence on the plot? How do you think the story would be different now that Max's father has returned? Because remember, in the story, he's basically living with his grandparents. Give reasons for your answer and how impressions of him now living with his father, who just came out of prison and took him in the middle of the night. How is that? How do you think the story is going to turn? And how do you think his relationship is going to be with his father? And I will post these questions online. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I am wearing my shirt. St. Patty's Day shirt. I hope you guys are doing well. And I miss you guys. And happy St. Patty's Day.